The room fell silent the moment her hand slammed against the glass conference table. The sharp crack echoed through the sunlit boardroom, bouncing off the polished walls and the skyline beyond. Every head turned toward the tall windows where the city shimmered under bright daylight, but no one dared to move. At the center of it all stood CEO Vivian Kessler, her tailored white blazer glowing in the morning sun, her finger pointed like an accusation carved in stone. Across from her sat a man with tired eyes and trembling hands. "Look at me again and you're fired." The words sliced through the air, and the humiliation hung thick enough to suffocate. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who refuse to give up, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Anne's Stories. Your support keeps these stories alive. Ronan Hale hadn't meant to stare. He hadn't meant to look up at all. He had simply been trying to hold himself together. The morning had already been a battlefield before he stepped into that glass tower. At 6 a.m., he had been packing a small lunchbox with unevenly cut apple slices and a peanut butter sandwich for his 6-year-old daughter, Mira. He had brushed her tangled chestnut hair into 2 messy braids, gently wiping away the tears she tried to hide because she didn't want to make him late again. Her asthma had flared during the night. Ronan had barely slept, but deadlines didn't care about exhaustion, and rent didn't wait for grief. Ever since his wife had passed 2 years earlier, Ronan had been living minute to minute, paycheck to paycheck, carrying both fatherhood and full-time work on shoulders that never seemed to rest. He worked as a senior data analyst at Kessler Innovations, a company known for its ruthless efficiency and dazzling profits. It was also known for its cold leadership. Vivian Kessler had built the company from the ground up after inheriting a struggling tech firm from her father. She was brilliant, relentless, and unyielding. Employees admired her from a distance and feared her up close. She valued discipline above empathy and results above excuses. That morning's executive review meeting was supposed to be routine. Ronan had spent weeks preparing projections for a new healthcare software initiative. Ironically, it was designed to help hospitals track patient treatment compliance. He had poured himself into the numbers late at night while Mira slept on the couch beside his laptop. But fatigue does cruel things to even the sharpest minds. One formula in the presentation spreadsheet had linked to an outdated dataset. The projected cost savings were overstated. Not drastically, but enough to catch Vivian's razor-sharp eye. The sunlight streamed across the table as she dissected the error with clinical precision. Her voice grew colder with each slide. Ronan felt the room shrinking around him. 3 other executives sat rigid, pretending to study their notes. No one intervened. When Ronan looked up, it wasn't defiance. It was desperation. His eyes were glassy, red from lack of sleep. He opened his mouth to explain, but the words tangled in his throat. Vivian mistook the look for challenge. And then came the sentence that would echo through the building for days. "Look at me again and you're fired." The humiliation burned hotter than the sun outside. Ronan lowered his gaze immediately. He felt something inside him crack, not pride, but dignity. He thought of Myra's inhaler sitting on the kitchen counter. He thought of her drawing taped to his office wall that read, in shaky crayon letters, "My daddy is my hero." Heroes didn't get publicly shamed. The meeting ended with stiff applause for revised projections, and Ronan walked out feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. His colleagues avoided eye contact. No one wanted to be associated with weakness. He locked himself in a restroom stall and let the tears fall silently. Not because he'd been scolded, but because he knew he couldn't afford to lose this job. He replayed the error in his head again and again, wondering how he could have missed it. He knew he was better than this. He used to be the employee Vivian praised in quarterly reports. But life had changed. That afternoon, Ronan requested a private meeting with Human Resources, not to complain, but to ask if remote flexibility was possible. Myra's school had called twice in the last month because of asthma attacks. The HR director listened politely but offered no promises. The company culture was clear. Personal issues remained personal. Meanwhile, something lingered in Vivian's mind. She had seen many looks in her career: anger, resentment, ambition, but the expression in Ronan's eyes had unsettled her. It wasn't rebellion, it was fear, and something else: pain. Vivian prided herself on reading people accurately. She had grown up in a household where vulnerability was punished. Her father believed weakness destroyed companies. She had learned to mirror that philosophy. But that night, as the daylight faded from her office and the city lights flickered on, she found herself opening Ronan's employment file. His performance reviews from previous years were exemplary. Promotions earned, Bonuses justified. No prior errors of significance. She scrolled further. Emergency leave 2 years ago. Spousal death certificate attached for documentation. Vivian paused. She hadn't known. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Sunlight flooded the city once again, illuminating both steel towers and small apartment windows alike. Ronan walked Mira to school, holding her tiny hand. She skipped ahead despite her cough, turning back to wave at him with complete trust. At work, whispers trailed him. The incident had spread quickly. Some felt sympathy, others saw it as proof that no one was untouchable. Around noon, an unexpected email arrived. Ronan Hale, please report to CEO office at 1 p.m. His stomach tightened. He imagined a termination letter already printed. At exactly 1, he stepped into Vivian's expansive office. The walls were lined with awards and framed magazine covers featuring her as the Iron Architect of Tech. She stood by the window, daylight outlining her silhouette. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then something shifted. Vivian turned, not with the same sharp edge as before, but with measured calm. She gestured for him to sit. Her voice, when it came, was steady but quieter than he had ever heard it. She acknowledged the error, but then she did something no one expected. She asked about his situation. At first, Ronan hesitated. Years of corporate survival had taught him to guard personal details. But something in her expression seemed different. He spoke about Mira, about hospital visits, about learning to braid hair from online tutorials, about nights spent calculating both data trends and inhaler costs. He did not beg, he simply explained. Vivian listened. The sunlight streaming through the window illuminated dust particles floating between them, fragile and visible only when light touched them. In that moment, Ronan's humanity became impossible to ignore. Vivian had built a billion-dollar company by demanding perfection. But she had also built it in isolation. No family, no children, no one waiting at home with crayon drawings. She remembered her own father humiliating employees publicly, believing fear created excellence. She had sworn never to be weak. But had she confused strength with cruelty? Later that afternoon, an all-staff email was sent. It announced the launch of a new flexible work initiative for employees with caregiving responsibilities. It also stated that leadership accountability included respectful communication. The next quarterly meeting was held under the same bright daylight. This time, Vivian stood before her team and acknowledged that leadership required both high standards and humanity. She did not mention Ronan by name, but she admitted that public humiliation had no place in the company's culture. Ronan sat in the third row, stunned. Weeks passed. Remote options allowed him to adjust his schedule. Myra's health stabilized. Ronan's focus returned sharper than ever. He corrected the earlier projection model and presented an improved version that not only fixed the dataset issue but identified new revenue efficiencies. The board approved it unanimously. One afternoon, as sunlight poured into the office break area, Vivian passed Ronan's desk. On the wall hung a new drawing from Mira. It showed a tall building, a small girl holding hands with her father, and a woman in a white jacket smiling beside them. Above it, childish letters spelled, "Kind bosses are heroes too." Vivian stopped longer than she intended. Change did not happen overnight. She still demanded excellence. She still corrected mistakes. But her tone shifted. Meetings became spaces for solutions rather than fear. The company's retention rate quietly improved. Productivity rose, not from intimidation, but from loyalty. Ronan never forgot the sting of that day. But he also never forgot what followed. 1 year later, under the same brilliant daytime skyline, Ronan stood on a stage inside the company auditorium. He had been promoted to director of data strategy. Mira sat in the front row, swinging her legs excitedly, her breathing steady and strong. Vivian presented him with the award. For a brief second, their eyes met again. This time, there was no threat, only respect. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that empathy can transform even the hardest leaders, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your engagement helps spread stories that remind us of our shared humanity. And before we close, I have a special request. Comment the word grace if you believe everyone deserves a second chance. The sun continued to shine through the towering windows, casting long, golden reflections across polished floors and hopeful faces. In the end, it wasn't the humiliation that defined that day in the boardroom. It was the courage to see beyond it. It was the decision to choose compassion over pride. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life, or an entire company, is the willingness to truly look at someone, and this time, see them.